When I first came here and I opened an office and stuff, and he was hiring me to do projects and stuff, and I kept sending him a hotel bill saying, here's my hotel bill for this month, please pay it. And in the end he said, through his bad English, he said, okay, no more hotel, you come and stay with me. I went and lived with Dai Chunfa on Tonghua Beilu, up by the Zhongzhai Bingguan. Up there, I lived up there for about a year. So I'd come in every 3 weeks. I'd be there and then I'd go back to London and then I'd come back again. He was just quite a character. He put me in this apartment, gave me a key and said, hey Mark, enjoy, have fun or whatever. And I was so tired and exhausted all the time. But anyway, he used to show up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, open the front door, I'd be sleeping on the sofa and he'd go, Mark, you hungry? I said, yeah. We'd get in his Jaguar and drive up to Tianmu to the beer house street and go and eat food at 4 in the morning. And I would get back and I was just wiped out. But still, it was charming. I think possibly it's partly because I'm a foreigner. They're always impressed if a foreigner is kind of like interested, willing to do strange things. As a foreigner, I've always been aware that I must take part. And I must be a part of what's going on around me. In other words, I'm not here to demand things, I'm here to help. I'm here to service people. And I think a lot of foreign designers come here as if they are owed something. They're not. I've had plenty of American designers come through my office and they say, oh, can I have a fork? I can't eat with chopsticks. Or why are we going out to dinner at 10 o'clock in the evening? I've got work to do, and it's kind of like this, go back to New York, forget about it. The inability to kind of fit in is really important. I guess over the years, that is one thing that I've learned.
大家好，我是 Archipapa 专家点。今天我们很高兴来到 Mark Lintott 的 studio 来访问 Mark 先生。Hello, Mark.
Hi. How do you do?
Let's talk about your learning journey. You have 9 years spending in UK. Talk about this period.
Actually, before that, I went to art school near Oxford. It was a very unknown school, but had very, very good tutors. My tutors were from the AA, RCA, and generally were very interesting people, had interesting lives behind them. So I was very fortunate to fall into that position. There were 2 partners and I was their first employee. We had an office in Chelsea.
From high school, you start your design?
No, I left high school and I had no idea really what I wanted to do. I knew vaguely all my life I'd said I want to be an architect. I don't think I'd really thought about what was involved in being an architect. It just seemed to me very attractive because it's a drawing involved and there's making things involved and there's a certain amount of prestige, intellectual rigor or intellectual strength. So it was something which I kind of held in the back of my mind and my mother approved, which is very important. I went to boarding school in England near Oxford. When I left school, I took a year or almost 2 years off. And I worked in America. I worked in a gas station pumping gas when I was 18, getting my hands dirty. I had the best time of my life. It was just fantastic. I loved it. Every minute of it, I loved it. This is in the east coast of America, near New York. This is 1978, 79. Okay. And I was just having fun. Yeah, it was awesome. But then eventually I had to settle down and my father made me go to college. He said, you need to do something. So he lifted me off the sofa and made me apply to art school. And I ended up going to a place near Oxford called High Wycombe, which is now a university. I studied environmental design, which is as close as I could get to architecture, without the need to be mathematical or too clever. I was very fortunate. I guess I enjoyed my art school, although I was kind of anxious to get out, make something, and make some money.
When I was trained in Taiwan or I went to States, the training as a designer is more practical in a way. It's, just do design and design and design. Yeah. But from what I know, the European training is not really start from the design, from solving problems. You start from intellectual aspect. How that really affects you?
I haven't experienced American education, but my feeling is from my interactions with American educated people or products of the American system, or a European system actually. My feeling is that certainly in England, the emphasis is on teaching you to think, teaching you to solve problems. Not necessarily how to solve the problem, but first of all, recognizing the problem in the first place and then finding ways around it. I don't mean problems, I mean like tasks if you're designing anything. It's how to approach those issues, how to kind of think outside the box. I think the emphasis during my college education and also my early years working was very much to do with discarding traditional responses and exploring new responses to old ideas, if you like. I mean, England particularly, and Europe, is a very old culture. And frankly, it's very difficult, really, especially at that time, it's very difficult to kind of step out of the historic context. You know, you're surrounded by old buildings, by history and all sorts of things, and it's very difficult to break away from that. I worked in London for 9 years, and all that time I was encouraged to kind of discard the traditional response to a problem, almost automatically discard it, and just explore new responses or new ways of looking at things. I found that very exciting. And the guys I was working with were fantastic. I still admire them very, very much. They were people who, with a very original thinking, very unique individual thinking, always pushed to kind of like go the difficult way. If it's too easy, it's not worth it.
Let's talk about this 9 years critical training. A lot of designers after graduate, and then we just go out and become a designer by yourself. I mean, for the young generation nowadays. But in that time, you spend 9 years professional to get the knowledge of the design and real construction.
Those 9 years in London, I was fully immersed in every aspect of being a designer. I mean, not just design, but actually how to sharpen a pencil, how to talk to a client, how to talk to a contractor, how to manage a contractor on a job site, how to manage a client, how to be reverential or respectful, but at the same time push everybody around you to do things which are not what they were maybe thinking. Difficult to explain, but all our clients were very unusual. During that period of time, our clients in London were rock stars, fashion designers. Luckily, they stimulated. I did a lot of work for Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood. She used to ride, we had an office in Chelsea, and it was an old grain warehouse, huge ceilings, and industrial elevators, you know, like New York loft elevators. And she used to ride into the office on her bicycle like this with a basket in front, shouting, "David, Mark, where are you, David?" She would just crash her bike into the desk and we'd all go out for lunch, and it was just extraordinarily stimulating. She and her partner, Malcolm McLaren, were two people who you could just sit there. It was like you switch them on and just watch them go. And every single sentence was an idea or a thought or a different viewpoint or a different way of looking at things. Absolutely fascinating. They probably influenced me more than anybody else, I would say. The guy I was working for, David Connor, he was very close to Vivienne and Malcolm, and he used to share a flat with a bunch of other musicians. He was very plugged into that side. I came in as a sort of rather naive, inexperienced new boy, basically. But I was absolutely enthralled by it all. And it was the most stimulating part of my life, the most enjoyable, until I came here.
9 years training yourself to become a real designer. You start from design, you do a lot of PM stuff. That intentionally training, or you just go along with it?
Just go along with it. It's not structured, I'm afraid. It was day-to-day learning, just taking any opportunity you could. I was hired originally because David had lost his driving license, so he couldn't drive. I had a car, and Julian called me up and said, "Mark, you know, can you come and help us? David's lost his driving license. We need somebody to drive him around." So I was hired basically to drive David around. I hope I was hired for other reasons too, but as I say, I like to think I was hired for some other values too. And I think maybe one of those reasons was everything I looked at, I found I was extremely enthusiastic. There was nothing that could stop me. I would never get fed up or despondent or upset. I was just want to do anything. Just being a sponge and just soaking it up, and I was having a wonderful time. London at that time was a very stimulating place to be. During the 80s, the economy in London was booming. Socially and economically, it was a great time. Most of my time was bouncing around from construction site to talking to clients and contractors. And we did a lot of fairly mundane work. I mean, we did a lot of houses in Kensington for nice rich people. They were projects where you would basically renovate a house, you would leave it almost in a state where you couldn't tell it had been designed, because the conditions, historic building conditions, controls were so stringent, so tight. We really had to think very hard about what you could do, what you couldn't do, and how to get around all the different regulations and codes. I learned a lot from that.
So what bring you to Taiwan?
When I started my first week in work, we used to post letters. So I had to go down to the post box every day and put it in the mailbox. But we soon got a fax machine. Anyway, we got a fax from somebody in Taiwan, and the fax said, "Dear sirs, we like your work. We saw your work in a Japanese magazine. Please come to Taiwan. Send us your bank account details, and we will send you money." We thought, come on, this is a joke. And we calling up our friends upstairs, downstairs in our building and say, "Hey, have you been sending us faxes and things, you know?" We were sure that somebody had sent us a fax as a joke, and we threw it away. And then a week later, we got another one. "Please send us your bank account details and come to Taiwan." At that point, I think it was Julian went to Taiwan. He made the first trip and was blown away by what was happening in Asia. I mean, we were all English boys, not really very well traveled. We had work in California and New York, Europe and things, but nothing east of Rome. Julian and one of the other people from the office made the first trip to Taiwan, and they came back and they were just astonished at what was going on here. The energy and the activity and the opportunity. And they came back, they said, "It's amazing, but I don't want to go again." They were absolutely exhausted. Anyway, in the end, we got this work. It was for Daichunfa, the ATT. We were hired to do a department store on Zhongshan. For us at the time, it was a pretty big job, and we were thrilled. Absolutely thrilled. And there was a big fight in the office, who's going to do the work, because obviously it would mean traveling to Taiwan and stuff. Anyway, after a few trips, eventually I was the only one who really wanted to keep going back and forward all the time, so which is what I did. And we finished that job, and while I was here, we got more work, more projects, and private houses and shops, movie theaters for Zhongxing Textile. By this time, I was the only one in the office who's just regularly commuting from London to Taipei all the time. And I was loving it because I'd been in London, working in London for 9 years. And it was fun. But at that age, I get bored very easily. And I thought, oh, a bit of travel is great. You can go and see some new people, new countries and new cultures. I lived in London. I had a wife and family in London. And we lived in Notting Hill. It was wonderful. We had a great life. But then from this work opportunity came up, basically. The way I saw it was my first trip to Taiwan, I thought it was just eye-opening. It was just amazing. The possibility of making anything you want. We used to produce drawings for lights or furniture, and the next day you would have a prototype on your desk. And it was just unheard of. In UK, that would take you 3 months to get to that point. So it was absolutely energetic and spot on. It was just energizing. Everything was electric. Early 90s.
So you decided to come in and then start your own practice. How are this turning point as a designer?
To be honest, all those trips, I was actually generating some income for the business in London. I was well supported by everybody in London. We used to bring work back all the time and had people in the office designated to work for me for those projects. I was very fortunate in that respect. But then it got to the point where the two partners and myself, we felt maybe we should have an office in Taiwan so that I can reduce the amount of flying, because after 2 years that was getting a little bit exhausting. Every 3 weeks I'd be coming out here. It's tiring. Anyway, we decided eventually that I should look into opening a branch office in Taiwan. And that's what I did. We opened an office. We shared an office with Pinhole, Daniel, who's one of my favorite people in the world. He's responsible for everything I have, really. I love him to bits, although I haven't seen him for years. It means a lot to me. So I came here and opened an office within his business. Eventually, we stepped out and opened our own office individually. 2 weeks after I opened that office, I got a call from one of the partners in London saying, "Oh, Mark, got a bit of a problem. We've decided to break up the partnership." So I was left kind of holding this office, and I had a choice. I could pack it all up again and come back to London and struggle with everybody else, or I could just stay here and run with it. Partners in London were very supportive and they were very helpful, and they're two of my best friends ever still. I said, "Look, I'm going to stay. Can you support me? Can you help me with like portfolio work, and can you help me with just logistics a little bit?" And then I was on my own. So I rented an office and put my name on the window, took it from there. That was like 1991, very early. Taiwan at that time, as I say, was very raw, very adolescent.
I think you are making history of interior design in Taiwan because of you leading the way. Let's start with your first project in Taiwan. When you start your own business, what's the project? How you make your name in Taiwan?
Well, there were several at the same, they all overlapped, and there were several going on at the same time, but one of them was this restaurant, which is called Just M. Zhongshao. I got staff in London to draw it for me, and then I was here, and then they came over here and supported me, and we built it while we were here. So that was one project. Then there was a number of private houses. We did a house for Dai Chunfa on Yangmingshan. I did a lot more commercial work. In London, we didn't do a lot of commercial work. It was mostly private residence and galleries, museums, that kind of thing. But here I did a lot of commercial, like movie theaters, KTV, all the traditional Taiwan features.
From what I understand, that you're really creating a new trend in Taiwan's nightlife or entertainment. Let's talk about this influence or new concept that you introduced into Taiwan.
Okay. You make it sound like it's a big planned move. It's not. You know, all these things they develop over time, and they kind of like, they morph and change, and eventually when you look back, you realize what you've done. I didn't really set out to do entertainment work. I really wanted to do high-end, very rich people's houses. But the difference was that commercial work, there was a lot of it, and it was very quick turnover, because commercially people here just wanted to get on with it. They wanted to make money. No desire to do any quality. It was just like, get it done, get it open, make money, which is fine. I worked for Chengwei, you know, Cashbox, Sincere Department Store, Xinguang. I guess the thing that made it work was I was willing and able to respond very quickly. I think a lot of foreign firms, and actually I experienced it. I saw a lot of American designers come through Taiwan. They last about 3 days and then they go home completely, what's going on? But I was able to adapt. I think the British are actually quite good at adapting to their environment and adapting to new cultures and stuff. I mean, we had a big empire at one point for that reason, unfortunately. My contribution was that I could think quickly and work very quickly and make things happen and get it done. So I could keep up with the needs of the local clients and still get something out of it for myself in terms of design. Obviously, work was very high turnover, but despite that, I think that each project I managed to generate something which I could be proud of from a design point of view. It wasn't just commercial. Whether the clients knew it or not, I was actually getting something out of it as well.
This aspect in terms of your drawing and your design, we can tell from the art school, but that also is where your creativity is, and is where your secret hidden in your design.
I learned all that from David, Connor and Julian in London. Their ability to communicate visually was fantastic. David did that drawing for me. That's actually a Vivienne Westwood store in London. We all worked together on these projects at the time. That one there, that's Opium Den, Yapianguan. That's a good example, actually. That was my first opportunity to do a nightclub or a bar. And I was absolutely thrilled to get the opportunity. These things build up and they generate. I met the owners for this place and they were planning to open this bar. And that opened in 1993, I think. At that time, they were all much more piano bar grown up, whereas these people wanted to open a proper bar, like a lounge bar. Luckily, I had something in mind and I was immediately I said, okay, I know what you want. Those two drawings I did on one Sunday afternoon. In about 3 hours, I had a terrible hangover, but anyway. They came in at 4 and we looked at the drawings and they were very excited and they said, great, let's do it. We went ahead and did it. It took about 4 weeks to build it and it was very, very successful. They made a huge amount of money and they got a huge reputation and experience from it, which is great. I'm very, very happy for that. I didn't make any money, but I got a lot of experience and a lot of PR reputation. It worked for everybody. And that was a great beginning of the sort of nightclub bar for me. In London, I spent a lot of time hanging out in bars and restaurants. Of course, everybody does. But in Taiwan, there weren't very many places like that, where you could go out in the evening, have a drink with friends, girls, boys, whatever, and it was just a straight up music and drinking. I mean, these days, it's everywhere. Every bar and club is like that. ATT, Fun, or you go to Frank, or you go to all these places. They all came from that bar, in my opinion. That was an extraordinary time, and I was very fortunate to be in the right place, I guess.
Talk about the intellectual side of it, because at that moment it's postmodern period. Your design is anything related to this postmodern trend?
I've never really been very good with labels, postmodern or whatever you want to call it. That particular project I approached as an English guy, and I drew on my cultural background and my experience living and working in London, and my environment in London, and the people I hung out with in London. So I just sucked all that information together into one place, and it turned out to be successful. I guess it's postmodern to some extent, but postmodern to me is a style. I don't really do styles. I like to think I don't do styles. I do attitude or approach. I think style is too easy for people to get comfort from following a style, or everything they produce fits in with that particular style or that particular category or whatever you want to call it. Whereas I've always, either through stupidity or through planning, I've just avoided repeating things. I mean, ideally, I should just repeat everything I do and then just make a lot of money and retire. But unfortunately, every project I do, I try to do something new, different.
You set up a trend for Taiwan's nightlife. Other than that, what's the new things when you are in the 1990s?
That particular time was the entertainment decade, like bars, clubs, KTVs. That's when the high-tech economy in Taiwan was beginning to boom. There's lots of spare money, lots of spare cash. It's a bit like when I was working in London in the 80s. Same kind of thing. There's lots of spare cash, lots of spare money, lots of opportunities to do new things. And so the 90s in Taiwan was a bit like that. The chip industry was just taking off. For me, I mean, that supported a massive amount of things I was doing. All the leisure entertainment things came from that. But I guess as you move it towards the end of the 90s, property development or residential, people's desire to live properly or live better becomes a priority. Now, up until then, the priority was to make money, get it in the bank, have a big car. It's fine. I have no problem with it. I admire it completely. But the idea to secure your future, both as a country and individually, I think Taiwan at that time particularly also was securing its future. It was solidifying its position, because it's since 1989 Taiwan, I think, was very unsure of what it was or where it was or who it was or anything. And I think that period from 1990 to 2010 perhaps was the period where Taiwan really found its feet and became a solid entity, a country. I don't want to get political, but you know what I mean. But when I first arrived here, I had no idea that Taiwan was not a country. It just seemed ridiculous to me. Of course it's a country. What are you talking about? But of course then you'd get the complications. But I think in the 2000s, that really began to change. You got democracy came in, and it was very powerful, very energizing. So from the 2010, 2020, Taiwan established amazing social fabric and democracy and solid foundation for a country. And it was great. But part of that, the business side of that, was people's desire to live properly. To go home in the evening with a family, be secure at home, be safe at home, work a sort of regular job maybe. The rise of the middle classes. So you got people working 9 to 5 and people running businesses, but doing it in a more considered, in a more planned way. For me, that was reflected in, we started doing a great deal amount of high-end residential, private houses, and houses for rich people, and also housing development. The switch was from commercial work to residential. At that period of time, most of our work was for property developers. What I found was that partly I suppose because of a reputation built on entertainment, we had established some sort of a name in the market. And so a lot of developers and sales companies started approaching us because they figured they could leverage that name or that profile to help them sell their properties. We were very successful, I have to say. So a third stage in my life here, I became very good at the work we did here, became very good at selling property. Our sample apartments, our sales buildings, or our residential design work actually help people sell their property. Developers would approach us because they knew that we could help them sell their property, sell their product. We developed a reputation for that, which was kind of nice. Whatever project we did, we looked at it differently. We didn't just do a standard response. Every project we did differently, and we tried to add some creativity into it and a story. People love stories. It doesn't matter if you're going to a nightclub or a KTV or a restaurant or a bar or a house or a property development where you're trying to sell a development. People like a story. We became quite good at storytelling. Like, okay, this is a house for this couple. They travel a lot. They have 2 young kids. They work in the high-tech industry. They read books. They listen to music. They have parents and they have family in Taiwan. They're very committed to Taiwan. Every project you build up this sort of like persona for the project. Who's going to buy it? Who's going to live there? And I think we were quite successful at being able to kind of like create that personality for a project. A lot of designers solve a function and solve a style, you know, give it a style basically. Whereas I like to think the things that we were doing had a little bit more fantasy to it, or a bit more story behind it. I mean, of course, it's all fantasy. If you're going to go and buy an apartment somewhere, you imagine yourself living in your home, in your apartment. And this is where you live, this is who you are, I've made it, right? I think that's really important. In England, you always say an Englishman's home is this castle. I always approach every project like this home is your castle, this is where you are, this is you. And it doesn't matter if we're making a story up or if we're doing it actually for a real person. Still building up a character or personality for that project. There was another one, actually I'll show you, we did one for Continental Construction, Dalu Gongsun. The architect for this was Andy Wen. This was to do with me. They wanted a concept that they could latch onto for their sales building, basically. I came up with where I'm from, which is in the countryside of England, out in the country, nowhere. Nobody around. Green fields, green hills, wild animals, trees, etc. Really simple stuff. This was done like a forest, again, a forest, because we had all these awkward structural columns in the way and things. So we turned them into an advantage, turn them into a forest. And then there's a cloud and there's fields. The whole thing is designed around the idea of an English landscape. That worked really well. They sold everything immediately. So it's not difficult. Even these little patches on the floor were to do field patterns. Field markings. But then other ones, this is Lianju in Taichung. So this is on the roof, the top of the building. There's a big dome, very extravagant, and we put distant, every window, you look out of the window and you can see 9,000 kilometers to Paris, 10,000 kilometers to LA. They're all arranged like that. That's slightly different, but nevertheless, there's a story attached to it. We want people to feel like they're involved and that they're part of the building.
After 2000, actually a lot of Chinese went to China, and I see your business moving a little bit toward that. Let's talk about your business. What the adventure you have there?
By the time that move to China took place, personally, I'd already moved enough. You know, I've done my time. I came from London and I pioneered or whatever. I pushed myself out and settled in Taiwan and I established a business here and went through all that work and all that hassle and all that reward, whatever. So I wasn't very enthusiastic about doing the same thing in China. Honestly. So any work that I did in China, I did for Taiwan clients. This is Xinguang at Chongqing. It was a great project. We did a huge department store and we put a carousel in there. It was just a great fun. Then I also did Hotel G in Beijing. Now this was for a Hong Kong development fund and they got this building.
So it's a remodel building.
Yeah, it's an old office building in the nightclub area of Beijing. It was done, we were brought on board. Actually, the Hong Kong clients, they also own the Bradbury building in San Francisco. You know, one with Blade Runner? They own that building as well. Anyway, they were the clients. They fired their original designers. I don't know why. We were hired about 9 months to go before the Olympics. About 2 months before the Olympics, Beijing was closed. So there was no construction, no traffic. The pollution was under control. So we had basically 6 months to design and build this whole thing. It was done very, very quickly and very efficiently and very immediately. It was great fun. Thoroughly enjoyed it because we were working for a well-organized Hong Kong company. Good clients, got good money behind them, and they had their own construction team and management team. So they were all very, very worked out, and we just had to come in and design it. It was a lot of work, but it was great fun. When I designed it, in my mind, I was thinking of people who go out to nightclubs. Where are they going to stay? You're going to stay in this place where it's kind of groovy and fun, and then you're going to go out in the evening, get smashed and slaughtered, and come back again. And so you're kind of like supporting that lifestyle. I mean, it wasn't quite like that, but because of the time and the budget, for instance, we kept the existing concrete structure, and we used a stencil to paint wallpaper pattern. So instead of using wallpaper and having to make it all smooth, we just used a stencil and sprayed it onto the walls like that. And then we got some dramatic photographs and some glamorous furniture and colors and things, made it like that. It was great fun. I guess it fitted in with Beijing at that time because they were expecting a big influx of foreign visitors for the Olympics. I think Beijing was very keen to be seen as an international city with international facilities, clubs, bars, restaurants, etc. This hotel was down a lane in Sanlitun. It's not on the main street. So we had to think of a way of making it an icon, making it a landmark. So when you were standing on the street, anywhere around here, we wanted to be able to see the hotel. Obviously, most normal people would say, oh, we'll put neon signs on the roof, just like we do in Taiwan. Put Hotel G, bing, 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 like this. But we thought that perhaps it might be more clever to treat the whole building as a sign. Each room, each guest room here, in the window, each guest had a remote control. When they checked in the evening, all the windows, all of them were this color, magenta. During the course of the night, as the guests come back and they fiddle around in their rooms, they change the color of the window. So by morning time, you've got all this huge variety of colors. But every day it's different. Every day it changes. So there's no big sign on the roof. It's just people walk around there. They know that's Hotel G because of the building. It worked quite well. Very simple and very cost effective, and no license problems. City government's not going to cause a fuss because there's no signage. It's just an interesting building. And in fact, when they first opened, you used to get your hotel receipt, your bill, and on the back there would be a printout of the color elevation of the building at that time. Every day is different. So you'd have a printout of your hotel. They were quite clever. They also had a thing, when you checked in, the girl at the front desk would say, well, would you like some company in your room? And then the girl would go back to the office and come out the front again with a goldfish in this fish bowl. And you have to look after this fish while you're staying in the hotel, give it back to them when you leave. So it's kind of a nice little joke, you know, but it also gives you a bit of life in the room. It's not just a dead space. Then we've settled back here and started doing more clubs, restaurants. This place, Hujiangyan, end of our lane actually. It's quite a nice Shanghainese restaurant. We just did a lot of different things. We did this in basement of Yiling. A lot of nightclubs after this. Also did this 18 Cafe was for the same owners as Room 18. This was opened because the staff in Room 18 were just exhausted and tired of working at night. They worked from like 11 till 5 in the morning every day. A lot of the staff said, I can't do this anymore. So the owners in the end, they said, well, okay, we'll open a cafe so you can work during the daytime. We did this cafe for them. This is on Renailu, and it only opened in the daytime and closed at night. That worked quite well.
So let's talk about the branding issue. Dig into your idea of how you do brand in terms of your brand.
I'm not like Adidas or Nike or whatever, so I don't have a brand format. If I have a brand, I'm not certain that I really do. But if I have a brand, it's to do with a concept or an approach rather than a physical presence. In other words, if you hire me, you don't know what you're going to get, but you do. You know that you're going to get something different, and you know that you're going to get something that's got thought and some integrity to it. In other words, my firm here, I will not accept just repetition. I will not accept people who take the easy way. I've lost plenty of staff who think being a designer, you just get a suit, get a nice pencil, and then I'm a designer. It's not like that. It's to do with attitude, mental positioning. How do you approach a project? I like to think that we approach every project in a different manner. However, over a long period of time that I've been doing this, I think there are probably consistent features or consistent trends that emerge through that philosophy. Sounds very pompous, but it's not really. It's just, I hate the idea of being thought of as, say, actually being thought of as a nightclub designer or being thought of as a cinema designer. I'm a designer, and I like to think that I can approach any form of design with the same mindset, and it'll produce fresh work. There are a lot of forms of design that I really haven't done, and I really would love to do. I'd love to do boat interiors. I'd love to do something with cars. I'd love to do something with aircraft, any of those things. And I like to think that if I had that opportunity, I would approach it in the same way. In other words, not in like doing a boat or something, I wouldn't approach it in terms of, okay, it's all wood and leather and chrome. I'd like to think that whatever we do would actually be a bit more thoughtful.
Most likely, Mark Linton is the brand that you have now as a personal brand. Your design first, every project is new. You do your own drawings, and you're still doing it. This itself is a sort of a branding. It's kind of interesting to ask this question, why are you still drawing?
That's a very good question. This is me, my personality. All of these sheets here, this is one project. This is me. This is how I think. I know how to do level of 3D drawing on a computer, but I find it completely lifeless and completely soulless. That's not to say it's not good. I mean, I think there are some fantastic computer renderings out there. It's just, I can't do it. I don't have the patience. I can produce that drawing in about 15 minutes or 20 minutes and it's done. What I hope my clients like is they can see me in this drawing. It could only be done by me. It's not been done by one of my staff on a computer somewhere. This has actually come out of my head onto the paper. It represents me personally.
I have 2 years experience working with micrograph project in Taidong Museum of Prehistory. He come to Taiwan doing a presentation. When he do a signage of a book, he draw for our staff. So I asked him, Michael, why are you still drawing? At age 65, he said, oh, architect is like pianist. You have to practice every day. It's a practice of your mind and your hands in one. That's something nobody can take away from you, and that's become your brain in itself.
It's interesting to talk about it because I don't talk to myself very much, but it's interesting to hear you say that.
Because when I come in, I saw you still drawing. I said, wow, what a life.
Why am I doing that? When I speak to Ernest Guan Chunyong, call him up and say, hey, how are you doing? So, oh, still pushing a pencil. It's the same thing,
As a foreigner, make a living in Taiwan over the past 30 years, how you do the business side of design?
When I stop to think about it, I think it's crazy. I think about a Taiwan designer came to London, didn't speak the language, but decided to stay in London and open a business. I think, what an idiot. Why are you making it so difficult? But it's true, and I guess I enjoy it. But I have to be honest, this is not a business for me. I mean, a business to me is where you're kind of making a product and selling a product, or selling a very clear consultancy or a clear train of thought. I mean, I do that, but thoughts are not very easy to market, not very easy to sell. The only way I can sell a thought is by making it or drawing it. But as a business, there's no business plan. That's the trouble. It's not like, okay, I'm going to write a business plan. I'm going to do residential for very rich people. I'm going to do nightclubs. I'm going to do KTVs, all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to do it like this. And I'm going to make this much money, income, and then I'm going to have this much. It's just not like that. I think most architects will agree with that. If you're lucky, you can plan a year ahead.
My perspective is that architect or designer business can be taught from certain theory. We can say good design is good business, right? This is kind of a straightforward link. You are getting good business. If you really apply the principle of business, it will get you good design. In terms of business meaning good company, once you get to a point, it will become a business practice, well-organized business, and then you will produce good design. So where you are on this circle?
I've never done any marketing. I don't do advertising. I have a website, but it's years out of date. So all my work comes from doing good work. If I do a bad project, that's going to be a hard time for me. And a bad project for me is one where the client loses money. The client's very unhappy for some reason. Luckily, I've managed to avoid most of those situations. So I've had a continuous stream of projects coming across my desk. And I've been very fortunate. But the only way to achieve that is not a business plan, it's just by doing good work. You have to produce work which has a value into a financial return and an emotional return. I have to have a really good relationship with that client for two reasons. One is because that means involved heavily. And the second reason is that they'll come back.
Let's talk about this return customer. I think it's most important in terms of marketing. Actually, a lot of designers count on this because good project, good client, bring back. For the young architect who's just start up their business, there's no reference. Your beginning, I can see that produce good design is definitely the way to do it. Is there another way? Or is there another way out for a designer, a young designer to really get into this?
If there was, I'd be doing it. Look, every designer, when they start their career, they have to make a decision. Am I going to work for myself or am I going to work for somebody else? If you work for somebody else, you're always secure in that envelope, or you're padded from the outside world by being part of a big organization, which is great. And very often I wake up thinking, I wish I had that. But then for some reason, when I started, I only wanted to work for myself. I never wanted to work for anybody else. Always wanted to have my own business. I don't know why, but that's the way it's been. I think mainly because I have control over what I do. I like to think I'm not a control freak, but I am. I get very upset when I lose control of things. If I lose control of a project, or I don't understand what's going on with a project, why we have problems with it. And I get very upset, start throwing things around. But it doesn't happen very often. But I think young designers starting out, it's really difficult. I mean, I wouldn't want to start out again in a totally different world. And I admire people, young designers now, who seem to be able to produce work and seem to be able to make a living and keep it going. And I think it's fantastic. I don't know how they do it because it's so complicated. When I was younger, I had a blind confidence in myself, completely unfounded. I didn't really question it. I just thought, I can do this, no problem. Watch me. I think it must be terrible for people who don't succeed like that. But then I don't think they would be putting themselves in that position.
Let's talk about leadership. You come from London, you establish your practice in Taiwan. There's a culture difference. It's a totally different leadership. Talk about your leadership style.
There's a Confucian aspect to all of this, where in Asia, particularly in China and Taiwan, you don't question your elders and you don't question your teachers. Traditional, keep your head down, do what you're told. I mean, that's changed a lot, I have to say, thank God. There's always been that element, whereas where I'm from, you're taught to question your elders, you're taught to not accept tradition, not accept what you've got. I lead by example. If I demand my staff are here at the weekend, or if they're here late at night, many years, you know, I've been here for a long time. Every time they're working overtime, I'm working overtime. Okay. I'm here. There was a time where I would make a point of being in the office before anybody else and being here after everybody else. And I think that worked for me quite a lot because it's different. I also worked very hard to try and get people to kind of question me or question what they were doing.
Let's talk about this training of your staff. You make yourself as an example for them. How you train your staff in the past?
In the past, I've trained my staff basically be decent, polite, hardworking human beings. If I can train them to do that, then that's a great thing. I don't train them how to draw. I expect them to be able to draw. I can't train somebody how to draw on a computer at all. That's not my job. But if they can't do it, then they're going to have to learn pretty quick. I think any training I can give staff, especially also with language barrier. I'm not Taiwanese. I'm a foreigner. The most I can hope to achieve is to lead by example. Train people to approach things in the same way I do and try to question everything. Sometimes you're successful, sometimes you're not. Unfortunately, when you're successful, those people tend to be very good and they bugger off and go and do their own thing. But again, I don't have a problem with that. Actually, in the past, staff have come to me and said, look, I've got some work of my own, I'm going to set up my own office. And I'll say, fine. That's great. Can I do anything to help you? And I'm very happy if they'll ask me questions and involve me in some way or other. Not for any financial or anything. It's just that I really like the idea that somebody I've grown and developed has actually got their own life and moved on. One of my very best friends, actually in the whole world, is Ubai. He is an extraordinarily nice guy. He's been to my house in the UK, came to stay for Christmas. Met my parents, and he went to watch Manchester United with my brother. He's a fantastic guy. I love him very much. He doesn't speak a word of English, and I don't speak Taiwanese at all. So our communication, I don't know how we do it, but I think he feels the same about me. Every time I see him, he say, hey, Mark, come here, tell me about my house. I've done 3 houses for him now. Each one, he loves his house. He lives in Xindian. I did that one for him 10 years ago now, I think. But even now, I have dinner with him and he say, hey, Mom, I love my house. You can't get better than that. You can't get a better result than that. And I love his honesty and his unpretentious. And I absolutely love him for that. I find him very refreshing. But we talk about anything, even politics, whatever. And I go and see all his concerts and he comes and sees my work. I really value his friendship. Very much. The other guy, my other really good friend here is Guan Chunyong. Again, I adore. Godfather, I love him like my brother. Seriously, I would do anything for him. He's the most charming, most polite, most cultured, most helpful, generous person you could possibly meet. He doesn't compare to anybody, for me anyway. For all these years, I've made friends. They're both clients. Really. I mean, even Guan Chunyong to an extent is a client. If my Chinese was better, I think I would be very good friends with a lot of my clients. I believe they like me more than they can say, or more than they can express, because they don't speak English necessarily. You know, I have a client in Taichung, for instance, Yenling, developer, and the boss is really nice guy, very genuine. And I would do anything for him. You know, I love him. But we don't communicate very well, very easily. Or Cashbox chairman. He is a fantastic, super nice guy. Enthusiastic, supportive, helpful, and he's given me great opportunities over the years. Again, I count him as a good friend. So I think if you can make a few friends like that, you don't need anything else. That's how I like to think I get work or keep work, keep clients, keep a reputation. The other thing I found is a long time ago, I should have realized that for me or in Taiwan at that time, very hard to fuck something up so badly that nobody wants to speak to you. I mean, I've done projects where I thought, oh God, that was awful. And it was just, I will never speak to these people again. And then the following week, they call me back and say, hey, Mark, I want to do this new place. So it's always a surprise.
For example, I really don't see my client as a friend. It's not easy to deal with that position because normally clients up there, we are providing service. But somehow you manage to swing it around that the client become your friend. And that's a very important position to be in.
For me, it's critical because I don't have the language. I can't pick up the telephone and talk to this guy and say, look, I'm sorry, this didn't go right. We'll fix this bit. Well, I can't do that. So I have to rely on that goodwill and keeping that goodwill. It's very, very unusual. I will almost never give up on a project. I'll never walk away. I think there's only 2 projects in 30 years that I've actually said, stop, I can't do this anymore, forget about it. It's not good, I can't do that. So I will never give up. I think that's one thing my clients kind of respect of me. I'm not going to get upset and walk away. Whatever happens, I will see it through to the end, make sure that their interests are looked after. That's not a financial decision because, believe me, at that point, I'm losing money pointless.
That's a very important, I would say, lesson for the young generation.
Yeah, I think don't be so proud that you can't realize that you've made a mistake or realize that perhaps you could have done better or realize that actually you don't get on with this guy. Don't be so proud. I think a lot of designers, I mean, I'm not just talking about here, but everywhere, are very precious about what they do. Quite rightly. I mean, they put a lot of heart and effort. Still, I think don't be so proud that you can't admit a mistake or you can't go back and fix something. Like Dai Fa, he's quite a character. I can't say he's really a friend, but we have a grudging respect for each other. When I first came here and I opened an office and stuff and he was hiring me to do projects and stuff, and I kept sending him a hotel bill saying, here's my hotel bill for this month, please pay it. And in the end he said, through his bad English, he said, okay, no more hotel, you come and stay with me. I went and lived with Dai Fa on Tonghua Beilu, up by the Zhongzhai Bingguan. Up there, I lived up there for about a year. So I'd come in every 3 weeks. I'd be there and then I'd go back to London and then I'd come back again. He was just quite a character. He put me in this apartment, gave me a key and said, hey, Mark, enjoy, have fun or whatever. And I was so tired and exhausted all the time. But anyway, he used to show up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, open the front door, I'd be sleeping on the sofa and he'd go, Mark here, you hungry? I said, yeah. We'd get in his Jaguar and drive up to Tianmu to the beer house street and go and eat food at 4 in the morning. And I would get back and I was just wiped out. But still, it was charming. I think possibly it's partly because I'm a foreigner. They're always impressed if a foreigner is kind of like interested, willing to do strange things. As a foreigner, I've always been aware that I must take part and I must be a part of what's going on around me. In other words, I'm not here to demand things. I'm here to help. I'm here to service people. And I think a lot of foreign designers come here as if they are owed something. They're not. I've had plenty of American designers come through my office. They say, oh, can I have a fork? I can't eat with chopsticks. Or why are we going out to dinner at 10 o'clock in the evening? I've got work to do. And it's kind of like this, go back to New York, forget about it. The inability to kind of fit in is really important. I guess over the years, that is one thing that I've learned. Every client wants to know that you're invested, that you're involved in their project. Every client wants to know that you're more than just being paid, that you are emotionally connected, I think. That's from my point of view. Again, as a foreigner, I'm here as a visitor. I'm not Taiwanese. My language is crap. But still, every single time I must make sure that I am come across as being enthusiastic, there to help.
谢谢马克带给我们这么精彩的心得的分享，谢谢他。
You're very welcome anytime.
Thank you.